David Purnell, FAMU Law professor and former dean of the law school, is here to share his thoughts on the attack on Capitol Hill on January the 6th. Thank you for joining us, Professor Purnell.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
What were your first thoughts when you saw the attack?
Well, you know, my background is largely in the criminal area. So, you know, when I saw this, first thoughts that came to my mind: crime is being committed, and certainly it was a situation that was frightening in that it certainly could have been even worse than it was. There was an inability of law enforcement to control this mob, and I think that mob violence has unfortunately been too much a part of our history. So the dangers from mob violence, and particularly for those who think that they're carrying out some type of cause, is significant. So, you know, I saw that, and I had to really wonder if we're going to have members of Congress and others seriously injured, regardless of their political views. I mean, and one thing that happens when you get that type of violent outbreak, political ideology kind of goes out the window. I think whether you're a Democrat or Republican, everybody was in danger at that point.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yes, and what are your thoughts on the criminality of it all? Do you think that criminal charges should be applied to the former president?
Okay, now we went as far as the former president is concerned. I mean, you have a couple of categories. Certainly, what's happening right now is not a criminal trial in Congress in terms of the impeachment trial. In order to bring criminal charges against the former president, stemming from the events that day, you are going to have to get past a couple of hurdles. The Constitution sort of frowns on the idea of criminal charges against a sitting president, or he was, of course, sitting at that time. But there are exceptions to that. Mm-hmm. We haven't had to deal with that in our country before, but certainly, if a strong case can be made on the three types of federal criminal offenses that are talked about most here are insurrections, sedition, and treason. I don't think anyone's seriously looking at treason because that would involve some type of usually foreign power. Well, we don't have any indication of that right now. Mm-hmm. But whether or not the president was guilty of sedition or insurrection in a criminal context, it's going to be hard to prove. I mean, the system's going to be very, very reluctant to do that. And first of all, in a federal prosecution, that's going to require grand jury action. So you're going to have to, first of all, impanel probably a special grand jury mm-hmm. to look at whether or not you want a president, then sitting president of the United States, to face criminal charges. Those are tremendous hurdles. So I am doubtful that there would be criminal charges stemming from January 6th. At least, I think the president is looking at some, or former president is looking at some possible prosecutions outside of that.
Right.
There are, indications of allegations of conduct that occurred before he became president, and certainly if there are allegations of criminal conduct that are violations of state law, those are also things that he at some point might have to deal with.
Do you think it's a defense to say, for the people who are currently charged with criminal activity, what do you think about the defense that they did it for him?
Well, that might work as in terms of mitigation on sentencing, but as far as a finding of guilt, that's not much of a defense. Mm-hmm. It sort of like, if you're arrested for robbing a bank and you say, I did it because someone else told me to rob the bank. So that they were the only time, in my thinking, that a directive might rise to the level of defense is if they worked for him. If he directed an employee or someone from the military or someone else that he had official capacity over to commit a crime, they might say, I was just following orders. But these individuals, I don't think that's much of a defense. Now, what will probably happen is they'll try to suggest that his inspiring them to commit criminal conduct should lessen the level of crime or charges that they face. But things like destruction of property, assaulting police officers, threatening bodily harm, those types of things, you can't defend by saying someone else told me to do it when you had a choice not to do that.
Certainly not. I appreciate that you sharing and clearing that up as far as the criminal charges and the possibilities and the levels of crime. And how do we prevent something like this from happening again, do you think?
Well, I think, one of the ways in which the system tries to do that is by taking action that will serve as a very specific and general deterrence for future criminal behavior. So you'd have to hold people accountable. I think it's important in holding people accountable for this to distinguish between words and deeds. And I think the legal system is going to have to make it very clear in holding people accountable that there's no privilege to engage in criminal conduct and to threaten or to cause individuals or even property harm that's not protected by anything. And I think that message has to clearly get across to those who might be tempted to do that in the future. And it also should be a lesson for those who can influence others to not take their own beliefs cross that line. The worst that could happen in terms of deterring this, I think, is to simply dismiss all these charges or not to hold anybody accountable and to put it off as people just being excited. This was more than just people being excited. And I think that there does need to be consequences. Now, I think that we'll see what happens at the Senate today in terms of, or in the future with the Senate, as far as the impeachment goes, or whatever action Congress takes afterwards. But whatever actions they take regarding the former president also is can be assigned to deter future action. It's a two-edged sword because it could just as easily inspire people if they look at him as some type of martyr. There's a very interesting and scary poll that came out yesterday, and I apologize, I can't remember exactly who conducted the poll, but it indicated that 60%, and I think it was something like 60% of Republicans, and I'm not trying to take a political position on this, but that's what the poll said. 60% of Republicans agreed that if the government were not protecting the people, that other actions should be taken, including acts of rebellion. That's a scary figure to think that is out there. So in the long run, what works best to try to deter this type of behavior is education.
Right.
It's educating our young people, educating people on how our system works, and restoring faith in our system, faith in a system that even if it doesn't do what you want it to do, you recognize that the system and maintaining it has its own value. And that's really at the heart here of what has happened when you have people who for whatever sets of reasons, feel that the system has to be abandoned because they haven't gotten what they want out of it.
Thank you so much, Professor Purnell, for joining us and sharing your thoughts Oh, it's difficult to find justification for what happened on January the 6th, and it's good to have perspective of law professors to touch on the laws that apply in instances like this. So we thank Professor Purnell for joining us, and thank you for watching this to get a better or broader understanding of what laws apply. Thank you.